At the age of 18, she was bought by a 60-year-old man to bear a child. The friends who came to see her off were actually happy for her, because overnight she had become the lady of a wealthy household. But Sophia believed she was nothing more than a tool meant to produce an heir. The man's name was Cornelis, a truly wealthy merchant. He treated Sophia with great affection and hoped she could give him a strong son to inherit his fortune. However, 3 years passed in the blink of an eye, yet Sophia still showed no sign of becoming pregnant. This became a serious problem, because according to an unwritten rule at the time, if she could not produce a child, she would be sent back to the orphanage. Cornelis decided to give her another 6 months, which placed even more pressure on Sophia. The only person she could share her feelings with was the maid Maria, because Maria herself had also grown up in hardship. Sophia had never treated Maria like a servant, and the two of them were as close as sisters. Maria had a boyfriend named Willem who sold fish at the docks. In order to help her boyfriend earn more money, she often found ways to serve fish at her master's dining table.
Are you in love with the fishmonger?
A seemingly joking remark from Cornelis happened to strike directly at Maria's heart. Deeply in love, she spent every spare moment meeting Willem, with Sophia covering for her. She became even more bold. Even at night, she would secretly invite Willem to her room. Meanwhile, Sophia worried about having a child every single day. Eventually Maria told her that there was a doctor in the city named Sorg who possessed a secret method that could help women become pregnant. For Sophia, this felt like grabbing the last straw of hope. Carrying all her expectations with her, she hurried to see the doctor. As soon as she met him, she poured out all her grievances and difficulties. She told him that her husband's previous wife had died during childbirth. Now that her husband was old, he only wanted a child to inherit his fortune, and she begged the doctor to help her. The doctor named Sorg comforted her and patted his chest, promising that everything would remain completely confidential. But unexpectedly, while asking Sophia to lie down on the bed, he casually began unfastening his belt. It turned out that he was no miracle doctor at all, but a man who used the excuse of treatment to deceive women by offering his so-called seed. This disgusting experience completely shattered the last bit of hope left in Sophia's heart. After that, she and Cornelis continued as before. Every night they prayed and then carried out their duties as if completing a routine task. Just when she felt that life had nothing left to look forward to, the appearance of a man completely disrupted everything that followed. Cornelis invited a painter to create several portraits of the couple, hoping to preserve these beautiful memories. The painter's name was Jan, a handsome man but also known for his flirtatious nature. When Sophia slowly walked out wearing a blue dress, Jan was instantly stunned. He could hardly believe that such an old man had such a young and beautiful wife. He stepped forward, deliberately separating their hands and removing Cornelis's hat as he prepared to paint them. After finishing the portrait, Cornelis asked Jan to paint another beautiful portrait of his wife alone. He instructed him to capture every detail of his wife's beauty with precision, but at that moment Jan had no interest in listening to him, because his gaze had already become completely fixed on Sophia. Because Cornelis was busy with business and often had to travel, the studio was frequently left with only Sophia and Jan. One time, he casually picked up a tulip and stood by the window in silence, his eyes filled with an indescribable helplessness and sorrow. It was such an accidental moment that suddenly ignited Jan's inspiration. The more he wanted to capture that moment perfectly on canvas, the clearer Sophia's image became in his mind. Her every movement, every glance that seemed to say something yet held back, felt like tiny hooks tugging at his heart. His heart, which had always wandered from one romance to another without ever truly staying for anyone, was now completely trapped. Jan's gaze toward her grew increasingly intense and obsessed, and Sophia felt uneasy under the way he looked at her. She feared that if this continued something would happen and she would betray Cornelis, so she found a chance to ask Cornelis if they could change painters.
What is it?
I don't want him here.
She said that she did not like this man, but Cornelis insisted that only Jan could paint a portrait filled with true inspiration, leaving Sophia with no choice but to quietly agree. After returning home, Jan became even more obsessed. He even asked a friend to dress up like Sophia and pose for him so he could paint, just to ease the longing filling his heart.
God help me. I'm in love.
At that moment he realized that he had fallen in love. Without hesitation, he rushed out to find Sophia. At the same time, Sophia used the excuse of visiting a tailor as an opportunity to go look for Jan, as if some invisible force was drawing them toward each other. Meanwhile, Maria seemed to sense that something was wrong. In order to meet Sophia alone, Jan wrote her a letter. Sophia felt nervous when she saw the letter and did not dare open it. At that moment Cornelis returned home. He opened the letter and discovered that Jan was simply asking to borrow 2 tulips to inspire his painting. At that time, tulips were extremely rare and symbolized wealth and status. A single flower was worth a whole week's wages for an ordinary worker. Although Cornelis felt great reluctance, he still agreed for the sake of the painting. When he asked Maria to deliver them the next morning, Maria said she had something to do and had to go out, so he told Sophia to personally deliver them the next morning. Sophia's heart immediately filled with excitement, even a small sense of secret joy. The next day, when Sophia arrived in front of Jan holding the 2 beautiful tulips, the fragile boundary between them finally shattered. At that moment, rules and social status were completely forgotten. 2 equally young and passionate bodies and souls were drawn together like magnets. From that day on, they began secretly finding small opportunities right under Cornelis's nose, seizing every chance to enjoy the thrill of their hidden romance. Once people are overwhelmed by passion, they stop caring about the consequences.
You've caught her beauty, sir, as well as her innocence and purity.
Meanwhile, her husband noticed none of the glances they exchanged. One evening, Sophia pretended to feel unwell and sent Cornelis away alone to attend a banquet. The moment Cornelis left, she put on the maid Maria's cloak and wrapped herself tightly inside it. Taking advantage of the darkness, she hurried to Jan's residence. However, this scene was accidentally witnessed by Maria's boyfriend Willem. He mistook the cloaked Sophia for his girlfriend Maria. Watching her enter a strange man's room and behave intimately with him shattered Willem with a sense of betrayal. He ran to a tavern in pain to drown his sorrows in alcohol, but misfortune continued to strike him one after another. First, his wallet was stolen by a street woman, and when he argued about it, he was beaten by her companions. In the end, he was mistaken for a homeless man and forcibly sold into naval service. Just like that, he was taken away by ship to distant Africa without understanding what had happened, while Willem completely disappeared. Maria's life fell into chaos. What frightened her even more was that she had become pregnant. In those days, if an unmarried maid became pregnant, there was only one outcome. She would be mercilessly thrown out by her employers and left to survive on the streets. In order to survive and protect the child in her belly, a desperate person is capable of anything. Maria directly confronted Sophia and used her secret relationship with the painter as leverage. Speaking with ruthless determination, "If you dare drive me away, I will expose your affair to everyone and make sure none of us escape the consequences." At this moment, Sophia was also pushed to the edge of a cliff. When she felt completely trapped, a bold and reckless idea suddenly came to her mind. Since Cornelis wanted nothing more than a child, and Maria happened to be pregnant, why not stage a perfect switch? She found Maria and proposed this plan that could benefit them both. Sophia would pretend to be pregnant, stuffing pillows under her clothes day by day to make her belly grow, while Maria secretly carried the pregnancy. When the child was born, they would simply announce that Sophia had given birth. In this way, Cornelis would finally have the heir he dreamed of. Maria would keep both her job and her child, and Sophia could complete her task and then run away with Jan to start a completely new life. Right after that, Sophia immediately went to tell Cornelis that she was pregnant. The moment Cornelis heard the news, he was overjoyed. After waiting so many years, his wish had finally come true. He kissed Sophia excitedly and kept thanking God again and again. His house had not been this lively for a long time, and he even began humming happily to himself. But in order to make the act more convincing, especially to solve the problem of sleeping together at night, Sophia went back to see the Dr. Sorg. This time she was not asking for help. She simply paid him. Sorg took the money and naturally agreed to cooperate. He pretended to give Sophia a medical examination. Then, with a serious expression, he told Cornelis that Sophia's pregnancy was unstable and her body was weak. So in order to ensure their son could be born safely, the couple must sleep in separate rooms from now on. The moment Cornelis heard the word son, his mind was already overwhelmed with joy. He did not think about anything else and agreed to this ridiculous request without hesitation. Thus the plan slowly moved forward in constant fear and tension. Maria began to experience nausea whenever Cornelis heard the noise and came to check on her. Sophia immediately pretended that she was the one feeling sick. She managed to deceive him with hurried explanations. Meanwhile, the painter Jan tried to gather enough money to run away with Sophia. He invested all his savings along with borrowed money into the wildly speculative tulip black market. He naively believed that if he won this gamble, he would secure a future with the woman he loved. What he did not know was that it was actually a bottomless abyss. At that very moment, Cornelis had to travel to India for business. This gave Sophia and Jan plenty of time alone together. They spent their days meeting and dreaming about their future life. During this time, Sophia also took extremely good care of Maria. This made Maria feel not only gratitude but also a growing sense of guilt. The The fates of these two women became tightly bound together by a child who had not even been born yet. Several months later, Maria suddenly felt intense pain in her stomach. The baby was coming. The climax of this elaborate scheme had finally arrived. Sophia forced herself to remain calm. At that moment, Sorg finally arrived, and Maria was already close to giving birth and suffering greatly. Downstairs, Cornelis heard the noise and believed that Sophia was the one crying out. Cornelis paced back and forth anxiously while praying desperately to God. Unexpectedly, the delivery became extremely difficult, and after several hours the child still had not been born. This brought out the deepest fear hidden in Cornelis's heart. He remembered how many years ago his first wife had died during childbirth in exactly the same way. Overwhelmed with fear, he completely lost control. He rushed to the staircase and shouted to Sorg, begging him to make sure Sophia would be saved first.
If it should come to that choice, let the baby go. I beg of you. In God's name, spare my wife.
Hidden behind the door, Sophia heard every word of Cornelis's heart-wrenching cry. At that moment, she finally understood how real and deep the feelings of the old man she had always treated as a transaction truly were. He did not love her as a tool to bear children. He loved her as a person. The shock and guilt instantly crushed her heart. But the play had already gone this far, and there was no turning back. By dawn, Maria finally gave birth to a baby girl. Sorg went downstairs and followed their script, delivering the terrible news to Cornelis. Sophia had died during childbirth, and even worse, she had been infected with the plague, so no one was allowed to approach her. Cornelis collapsed on the spot and angrily cursed Sorg for being useless. He tried to rush into the room just to kiss his wife one more time, but Sorg and Maria desperately blocked him, claiming the plague was contagious. Sophia lay on the bed pretending to be dead while listening to Cornelis's heartbreaking cries, her heart overwhelmed with guilt. She once believed that leaving this place meant freedom and sweetness, but in that moment the only person she could think about was the husband who truly loved her and whom she had hurt so deeply. Later, Sophia's body was secretly placed into a coffin by the doctor and quietly transported away through the canal. She arrived at the place where she and Jan had arranged to meet, waiting for the man she loved to take her away to a new life. What she did not know was that the tulip market had completely collapsed. Jan had lost everything he owned, and he was trapped inside his house by furious creditors. Sophia waited and waited for news from Jan, and the passion in her heart slowly began to fade. She suddenly realized that she did not long for Jan's appearance as much as she once thought. At that moment, she understood that she had made a terrible mistake. In chasing a fleeting passion, she had hurt someone who truly loved her. She finally made up her mind and chose to let go. She asked the boatman to pass a message to Jan saying that she had already left. And then she disappeared alone into the streets of Amsterdam. She secretly returned to the home she once hated. Through the window she saw Cornelis holding the baby girl, his face unable to hide the sorrow. Yet the way he looked at the child was filled with tenderness. Seeing this scene, she hesitated. Shame made her want to rush inside and confess everything. But after thinking it over again and again, she finally chose to walk away. She threw her blue cloak into the river, making a final break with the past. When Jan finally escaped from his creditors and learned that Sophia had gone, he searched the entire city like a madman, until he saw the familiar blue cloak floating on the river. He believed that Sophia had lost hope and jumped into the water. An overwhelming grief swallowed him completely. Holding the cold and wet cloak, he cried out Sophia's name with a broken voice. 1 year later, Willem finally returned. When he knocked on the familiar door, the person he saw was Maria holding a child in her arms. He angrily accused Maria of betraying him. Maria cried as she told him about all the hardships she had suffered after he disappeared. The two of them argued fiercely. In order to explain everything clearly, Maria finally revealed the entire truth. And at that exact moment, Cornelis, who was about to enter the house, heard every word. The truth was like a blade that cut through every layer of disguise. But Cornelis did not become angry, nor did he collapse. After experiencing so many separations and losses, his heart seemed to have grown numb, or perhaps calm in a way that transcended everything. He finally realized that the root of this tragedy might have been himself. It was he who bought Sophia with money, and it was he who pushed her into desperation because he wanted a child. The next day, Cornelis left behind a letter and departed alone for distant India. The letter roughly said this: Maria, I forgive you, because I also made mistakes. I once bought Sophia as if she were an object, and then treated her harshly because I wanted a child. I leave this house to you, but you must promise that the child will carry my surname so that the family's reputation will be protected. Let everyone believe that this child is my heir. kind-hearted Cornelis left just like that. In the blink of an eye 8 years passed. Maria and Willem lived peacefully in the large house and had several more children. Every morning they prayed with their children for Cornelis far away. After experiencing great rises and falls in life, Jan picked up his paintbrush again and gradually became a somewhat well-known painter. One day he was invited to paint a mural in a monastery, and when he casually turned around he unexpectedly saw Sophia. They simply looked at each other and smiled, and everything was understood without words. The ending of this story has no fierce arguments and no late apologies, only a silent smile. All the passions in this world are like the tulip that once could exchange for a castle. When it blooms it drives people mad with desire, but when it withers it becomes worthless. When the excitement fades, one finally realizes that something rarer than reckless love is quiet protection and forgiveness. To smile and make peace with everything in the past may be the best ending of all.